All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women in digital who choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can learn more about us and join the movement at www.togetherindigital.com. Today, my friends, we are going to discuss why stories don't compel people to buy. Conversations do. We're going to help you skip the complex and ineffective narratives and develop three critical messaging components of brand that wins more work. Sounds good, right? To help us do that, the phenomenal and talented Kate DeLeo is here with us today. Kate is a brand architect, number one international best-selling author, and the founder of the brand Trifecta, the top brand building platform that has helped thousands of organizations craft brands that bring more prospects to the table, more users who click, and more customers who buy. How's that for a pitch? We've got some things to learn from Kate today. Her approach is rooted in the belief that brand is the path of least resistance to revenue. She teaches us how to illuminate complex and ineffective storytelling by delivering a simple yet provocative message that tells prospects what to do, how you solve their problem, and how you differ from the competition. The outcome? Brand conversations that convert. I don't know who's not ready for this conversation. I know I am. Kate, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yay, thank you, Amy. It's a joy to be here. And, it's fun to be able to see this bright, thriving community that you have built. I've been a champion of yours and just a fan of yours for so long. So this is awesome to be here today.
Ditto, ditto. Yeah, I wanted to share a little bit for our listeners how Kate and I met. It was one of those IRL moments, which honestly, with a lot of my podcast guests, thanks to the fact that we've been doing this virtually in COVID for the last 2 years, haven't had the chance, but I got to
Yeah.
hear a really amazing and compelling, what ended up being a 3-page note speaking session that Kate did at Content Marketing World. And I love your enthusiasm and the
Thank
clarity
you.
that you bring to things in your directness. So again, mutual fan, super excited to have you here in this space with us and introduce you to our amazing and beautiful and generous community. You definitely carry a lot of that Together Digital spirit. So I'm so
Thank
glad you're
you.
here.
Yes.
Before we dive into the fun of brand messaging and nerding out on all those good things, could you share a little bit more about your journey and what
Yeah.
led you to become a brand architect? Were there any pivotal moments or experiences that shaped your approach to branding
Mhm.
specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because maybe some folks can relate to this. I really have had a very zigzag career path. This has never been this perfect straight line. I think that everything began coming out of college around the time that the market crashed. So let's rewind how many years, right? And 2007, 2008, I was actually at a point where I was planning to pursue a PhD in linguistic anthropology.
Oh,
I was very fascinated with, this concept of how language shapes culture and how culture
mhm.
shapes language, and was ready to really embark on that postgraduate work. And when the market crashed right around that time, I had a professor that said to me, Kate, I love you. I think this is great that you're passionate about this, but chances are this is not going to provide a lucrative opportunity for you to really make a
Ah,
living. We don't really know where this field is going to be.
mm,
It's probably in your best interest if you go get a job and get some real world experience, pay off your debt, and come back. So
wow.
I actually left academia and I had to get a sales job to be able to pay the bills. And it was in that sales job, Amy, where I was cold calling IT professionals to sell them training
Oh,
classes
cold
because
calling.
that's a
Been there,
great,
done that. It's the
yeah,
worst.
not the smartest sales job to take, when you've never really done it. Like when I think back on it, I'm like, why would I do that to myself? Um, it was really in that job that I learned about the power of branding.
Mhm.
And it was from a pure necessity of how do I break the ice and connect with somebody over the phone? What would be
Yeah.
compelling to want them to have a conversation with me, that I had to kind of create my own way of breaking through that wall a little bit. And that's now this brand trifecta formula that I teach of what people really want to know in that first 30 seconds in order to dig into a real conversation with the brand.
Mhm.
So even since then, though, I really got recruited out to work in agency world and marketing world, and then in corporate America. And I was side hustling for years,
Mm.
um, building brands and doing marketing work on the side. And then, 5 years ago, I finally took the business full time into really what it's evolved into now. So,
That's amazing. I love that. I love asking that question because I think, again, still too many of us assume that career paths need to be linear in order to
no.
be deemed successful. And that is absolutely not true. In fact, I don't think I've had a guest yet that hasn't zigged and zagged their way through sort of finding their way and figuring out what works for them. And it does make me think, having also shared that experience of doing cold calls, I was selling windows for A&A
Oh,
Window and Door. Talk
oh, you
about
understand.
brutal.
Okay. Oh,
Talk about
yes.
brutal, but I think you're right. I think it's like a boot camp for figuring out you have only their ears. And you only have their ears for maybe a minute before they're ready to hang up on you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to really challenge yourself to say, what can I do to stop them in their tracks and keep them on the phone for even a moment longer? So yeah, I mean, for as much as I loathed it, what a great way to sort of train the way that you communicate what it is that you are trying to offer or what problem you're trying to solve. Um, than that, I don't know. Maybe you all should pick up some cold calling. Try it. It's fun.
Commend it. No, I'm kidding. But you know what though? It was a good experience in the sense that what it really opened the door for me to recognize too is not only did I uncover like, okay, so logically, what is this
Mhm,
brand pitch that I need to give in the first 30 seconds, right? Which is now what I talk about
mhm,
professionally. But I think, Amy, there was also this part where I recognized that sales does not have to be slimy. Sales is just about communicating with somebody
mhm,
else. It's really about communication and it's about finding common value, common ground,
mhm.
where there's maybe an exchange of goods or services or value, and everybody's walking away really happy and excited. And it opened up a level of confidence in me that I didn't need to be a slimy salesperson.
Yeah.
And by the way, especially as I remember being in corporate now as an entrepreneur, where I technically have to sell myself or my services and products,
Hmm.
that was very intimidating because I was
Yep.
really afraid,
Hmm.
really deeply afraid because of maybe my values and the way that I was raised in Midwest
Yeah.
Minnesota here. Hello, don't be pushy, don't be too
Hmm.
salesy. Okay, you don't want to come across as this, and
Yeah.
especially as a woman. I was
Yep. Oh,
told you're not
absolutely.
allowed to do that. Nope, nope, nope. But I
Yep.
recognize sales is just about finding common value. Well,
Hmm.
oh, maybe that I could do that.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great way to kind of test those chops. Let's talk a minute about something that might feel and might have captured some of our listeners' attentions when they chose this episode. That, conversations that convert, but then in
Mhm.
the summary, we talk about how stories, I think stories have kind of been a buzzword in marketing and advertising for the last, I don't know, maybe a decade now, right?
Yeah.
Authenticity, I would put that up there with storytelling, right?
Yep.
Storytelling is an amazing and remarkable tool. There's a lot of reasons why, as humans, we love stories. But how did you come to realize that stories may not be as effective as conversations in compelling people to
Yeah.
buy? And
Yeah.
what led you to focus on that specific aspect of conversations for branding?
Okay, so there's a couple pieces I want to address here. So first of all, I think I love story as a concept, right? So I think
Mhm.
storytelling is great. Story has a part to play, by the way. When we talk about marketing for a second,
Yep.
so as marketers, if you ever hear about, content planning and content hierarchy and storytelling, story has a part to play in your content strategy.
Hmm.
The problem is that we lead with a complex story and then we lose them.
Yeah.
And instead, my whole thesis statement is that story belongs a bit further down.
Hmm.
Now, when storytelling came on the market as kind of the next big thing was with a man named Donald Miller who wrote this book Story Brand, and
Oh
I
yeah.
actually
I remember that.
I loved what he had to say, which was that hello, make it about your customers, right?
Hmm.
Um, Problem is nobody told us how to write the story necessarily, so we made it all about
Ah,
us. So
yeah.
the dumbest thing that happened one time, and I'm sure everybody's had this moment, but I remember going to a Chamber of Commerce event, and when it really clicked in my brain that stories don't work, is I go to this Chamber of Commerce event. It's in the height of the storytelling decade,
Yeah.
and somebody shakes my hand and I'm like, "So, Kate, tell me about yourself. What do you do?" And I launched into this convoluted story. Have you
Hmm.
ever done that and you see the eyes glaze over?
Yep.
And you're like,
Yep.
oh, and I lost them. So
Yeah.
like what I realized, Amy, really quickly is like story is not compelling somebody to want to engage with you and go deeper in a conversation.
Hmm.
Brand conversations convert if it's built off of a systematic way of like answering very simple questions.
Hmm.
People at the end of the day don't want to be on the end of a story. You have one person talking, you
Yeah.
have one person listening.
Yes, that's a great point. We've got a note from one of our live listeners. Yes, I've done that. I got very uncomfortable when telling a story. Well, let's just say, Anna, it's good practice. I think understanding and practicing and honing your story and or pitch is a part of the process. So we've all been there, so don't feel too bad. But I agree, Kate. We've only got people's attention for so long.
Right.
How do we make them feel truly compelled to engage in the conversation so that at some point we could begin to unearth and involve them into the story. And again, like his book, make it more about them versus the you. And that might be another trap, right? Is like the storytelling oftentimes puts you or the brand at the forefront as the hero, not the customer.
That's right.
That's just not a way to go. Let's dig into this some more. Let's talk about some myths, common myths that businesses kind of fall victim to. And how does debunking these myths contribute to creating brands that lead to what really matters, revenue?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think one of the biggest there's some big myths that we have, which is that brand is nebulous, it's fluffy, it's
Mm,
creative, it's pie in the sky. And I understand that because when we hear that word, we're like, brand, what does that really mean?
uh-huh.
And the whole theory of my work is that your brand is your path of least resistance to revenue.
Hmm.
And that could be both personal branding, but also corporate
Yes.
branding or an organization's brand. Because at the end of the day, what your brand is really addressing is your ability to tell somebody with your message in that first 30 seconds, this is what I do, this is how I solve your problem, and this is how I'm different than the
Hmm.
competition. And I really think, Amy, that is the stuff that compels somebody to go, oh, no, that's interesting.
Hmm.
I want to know more, right? That's what opens the door. It's what creates a opt-in moment, a conversion moment where that other
Hmm.
person in that conversation is like, ah, okay, you got me. How
Hmm.
do I learn more about this? But I think a lot of us have some deep fears about what brand is and what brand isn't. We have a lot of misconceptions. And a lot of it stems from FOMO.
Hmm.
We see what other brands are doing in the marketplace, and we think that we have to do what they're doing. Or we're so worried about our competition and what they're doing
Yeah.
that we actually try to be like them in the
Hmm.
process of building our own brand. But what's hysterical with that is if you think about it logically, if your competition is doing a great job being blue and green over here, right?
Hmm.
Why would you want to go be blue and green in a sea of blue and green?
Yeah.
Doesn't it make sense that you should go be your orange or purple or hot pink
Right.
self over here?
Hmm.
Because there's people that need orange and purple and hot pink in the world.
Hmm. Yeah.
But we're so worried about what other people are doing.
I would agree. I can't tell you how many times having been a former creative director within agencies, having clients just spend so much time, energy, even money at times, just chasing down what other brands were doing versus evaluating and seeing it and kind of pulling it apart and saying, well, this is what's working for them. How can we take something like this and make it work for us within our unique experience?
Bless you. I get it. It's that time of year. It is so bad. Yeah, brand is about individuality and authenticity. And I think that's where we want to be thinking about, how do I authentically show up in the world? What is it that makes me very different and very, very unique? And not from a place, again, of like trying to bash others. It's not about, oh, I'm so much better, but actually, you are different than the competition, and that's 100% okay. I think the other myth or the other misconception, or the other thing that we often do as well is when it comes to branding, you know, we we get really we get really afraid of not telling everybody everything on the front end. Have you ever been in a situation where you're talking with somebody, whether you're selling for yourself or you're selling or trying to describe the value of what your company does, or maybe it's just your personal brand talking to somebody, And have you ever been in this weird situation where you just go, but yes, but Kate, if I don't tell them all the things we do and all the features and benefits and all the amazing stuff and da, 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 then they're not going to understand how great I am and the value I do, and they're not going to buy. I think that that really shoots us in the foot.
Hmm.
Instead, it's flipping this narrative to say, here is the value I deliver. Oh, by the way, how I do that happens to be
Hmm.
through ABC. Once they've opted in to want to care and learn about those things.
That's so interesting. I think, yeah, as I was saying before I started my coughing fit was, being in that difficult position where trying to help brands and companies understand the importance of being distinct because obviously we're in a sea of increasing competition. I look at and think about a lot of the brands that I've worked on in the past. And, so often I was trying to really push them and urge them to move from having just not even a tone of voice, like a TOV, but a POV. Because, like, also what happened was they ended up sounding and seeming so vanilla. They didn't have a
That's
point
right.
of view. They didn't take a stand for certain things in which would have actually brought them into important conversations, actually position their product as a way to help to solve a problem and become that
Mm-hmm.
much more valuable and grow loyal customers by kind of earning that trust and respect, which I think are so paramount for brands to kind of, elevate their reputation. So it's like, don't take a note again and take inspiration from those brands that have, broken out of the pack, but understand they got there by being different. They didn't get there by being the same. So yeah, this is a very, very familiar pain point, I think, for a lot of us marketers when we're kind of dealing with
Yeah.
maybe clients that don't quite understand the dichotomy there and the importance of, like you said, explaining the how and then the differentiator. So are those the three? Because then that was my next question is what are the three steps if brands are
Yes.
looking to create a compelling
Yep.
three key message components? Those are the three essentially.
So let me walk you through it real quick. Let me,
Yeah.
if I can. So the first one is, and again, this is my method called the brand trifecta. Now, what you're about to hear is not necessarily anything new under the sun, but I do want to kind of give you a quick understanding of how I built this and why I built this. Okay. So after I stumbled upon this whole formula of A plus B plus C creates a conversion moment, meaning opt-in moment. Someone's like, oh, makes sense. I want to know more. Okay. What I recognize is I spent some time actually working with psychologists and actually going through the back end to go, let's prove this out. Does this really compel somebody? And believe it or not, it's based on very simple buyer psychology. Okay. So the three components are number one, a tagline that says, this is what we do. The first thing that somebody wants to know, Amy, when they walk in the room and they shake your hand, what's the
Mhm.
first thing they're going to ask you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you do? Right? Now, if I just said, oh, I'm a marketer, I do brand. Like, who cares, right? Like, who
Yeah.
cares?
Yeah.
But if
Doesn't make you
I come
stand
in and I
out.
can't, but if instead I kind of deliver my tagline, which is I build brands that win more work. Okay, it's a little different. Now, if you're my target audience, you might find that very compelling. And by the way, you guys, if you've ever delivered a really good tagline, when you tell somebody what you do, you get this interesting body language. You ever had somebody do the head tilt lean and like, really?
Oh yeah.
Really, what
Yeah.
do you mean by that? Okay, so this it's about provocation with brand and authentically provoking somebody with an emotional response. Okay. So the first part is you want to tell somebody what you do, tagline. Now, if I've provoked them authentically, whether they read it or they hear it, then I'm
Hmm.
going to deliver the second piece. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that with a value proposition statement. Now, a value prop or value proposition statement is really the statement that creates the oh my gosh, you get me moment. Have you ever gone to somebody's website and in the first few sentences, you're like, yes,
Hmm.
yes, I
Oh yeah.
love this. Okay. So chances are that brand had a really strong tagline and value prop. Okay.
Hmm.
But a value prop at its core is really just addressing here's the pain that you're experiencing, and here's how you can solve that pain with our brand.
Hmm.
So then that leads to the third and final piece of the brand trifecta, which is then a set of differentiator statements. The one, two, three, maybe four bullets of how you're different and yes, better than the rest. Now, I'll tell you, here's what's fascinating. It's really interesting because most brands do not put their points of differentiation in the right order, or they skip them altogether.
How so? What do you mean by the wrong order?
Often people will lead with features and benefits of the product, or maybe
Mm,
they'll say, here's how we're different, and then we'll give you the value prop. But what I'm going to explain is you have to actually have your points of differentiation as the third and final piece because it creates the conversion moment. Can I give you a really dumb example to kind of hit this home?
please.
Okay. So imagine you and I are in the room, right? And we meet. And so this is the brain trifecta in action, you guys. And it's the dumbest example. But you and I meet for the first time. You're like, oh my gosh, Kate, so nice to meet you. I'm like, so great to meet you, Amy. And you look at me and you say, hey, so what do you do? And I tell you, well, let's imagine I run a tax company. Let's just try this for a second. And let's say you're my ideal audience. You're a small business owner. Okay. Okay. So I come to you and I'm like, oh, well, I help make compliance effort for small businesses. And you're like, really, what do you mean by that?
Hmm.
Now, by the way, my tagline is making compliance effortless. You're like, really,
Love
what do
it.
you mean by that, Kate? So then I serve up number two, value proposition statement. So I'm gonna explain what I mean by that. I say, well, Amy, the reality is that tax is a major part of your business, but it really does not need to be a major part of your day.
Wow. Love it.
And you're like, oh God, that's what I'm facing,
Uh-huh.
And I go, so, my job is to help you protect your credibility, relationships, and profits with worry-free tax consulting.
Hmm.
Do you see how she can solve her problem there? See, Amy, that's what I mean
Love
by
it.
making compliance effortless. Okay. So gave that was like 15 seconds, right?
Yeah.
I gave you my tagline and then my value prop. Now here's what we can't miss. And this is so interesting because for years I tried to just give the two and it didn't
Hmm.
work. Okay. At this point, logically, it would make sense that you would want to know about my products and services, right? My tax services,
Yep.
right? Here's the thing though, you're not quite ready yet. Can I tell you why?
Please.
All right. Because your brain is trying to make sense of the compelling, jazzy,
Yeah.
authentic new information you just heard. So, do you know what is going on? Is your brain's going, wait a second, I need to make sense of what I just heard. This is super interesting.
So true.
So, when the brain takes in new information or data, do you know what the brain does to make sense of it?
No.
It compartmentalizes it, it
Uh,
compares it against something it already knows.
gotcha.
In other
Makes
words, you're
sense.
going to actually put me into a category that you have predetermined in your brain. You're going to compare me to the competition, my friend,
Another company. Yep,
and I
exactly.
want it to happen.
Yeah.
So I get this question all the time. Like as a marketer, I might get asked, so Kate, are you like a copywriter or graphic designer when you say you do branding? In this tax scenario, you might go, so are you like TurboTax or H&R Block, or are you like the
Hmm.
big four tax companies? And I go, oh my gosh, Amy, great question. I'm a little different. Here's how. And
So
then I can
great.
hit my bullets, my
Hmm.
differentiator statement. I only focus on taxes for small business. I'm super agile and flexible. All right. So I give out my three or four ways I'm different and better to you. And finally, after that, to give you your brand trifecta, now you're at the point of conversion. When you look at me and you go, that's so interesting, Kate. So, okay, how does that work? Or what does that look like? How does that work? What does that look like? So here's the sweetest, coolest part about this. It's finally after delivering the brand trifecta, you've had a conversion moment. Because when you ask the how, what question,
Hmm.
that is signaling you are opting in now and you are saying, tell me how you deliver on what you just said. What's included?
Yeah.
What's the features? What's the benefits? What's the price? What's your process? In other words, here's the method. You must hit all those three things for Amy to be at the point where you actually give a crap about my tax services. And
Yep.
that's okay. The job of your brand, my friend, and the job of your brand trifecta is to simply get you there in 30 seconds or less to that conversion opt-in moment. By the way, on our website, this is where we track Amy, and you can watch people systematically go to the process or services page
Hmm. Oh,
every
that's
time like clockwork.
fantastic.
Every
Oh, I love
time, or
it.
they click, now I want to watch the explainer video.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you all are taking notes. I know I'm going to go back and again, always giving me a ton of great, very actionable, clear steps that are clearly being proven by data as well in the conversions and the revenue that you and your clients are gaining through kind of this process and refinement. I love it. It's great. That's so, so helpful. Um, and you started off by answering the question by sort of defining a little bit about what brand is. And obviously that is a bit of a beast. I think oftentimes, everyone thinks it's a big undertaking and they throw a lot of cooks into that kitchen and into that process. So for those who are kind of looking to sort of push or refine or better define or even create their brand, how do you navigate the challenge of simplifying the brand message while ensuring that it remains both provocative and distinctive in such a competitive market? Because I think this is where most of us who are marketers that are servicing clients feel like our the souls get sucked out a little bit, right? Because you have this vision and this idea and this process, and you want to kind of follow this vision and direction. And then you kind of find that, because it's a branding thing, all of a sudden everybody and their mom's included. Like, no joke, the client will take it home and show it to their mom and their family to get feedback. Like, how do you sort of keep that whole process neat and tidy, effective and efficient? And then really holding true to the desired outcome, which is,
Yeah.
being a revenue generator.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when it comes to kind of refining and then actually like putting your brand into the world, yeah, not everybody needs to be part of that conversation, first of all. That's first and foremost. But I think that there's a couple big buckets of work that you can think about doing in order to really improve and follow through on your brand. So the first bucket of work, believe it or not, is really understanding how you authentically show up in the world. The reason that sometimes we feel like are having this soul-sucking moment is because we're trying to be something that we think we're supposed to be.
Mm,
We think we're supposed to show up this way, but
yeah.
actually, brand is not aspirational at all. Great brands are 100% authentic. And I
Mm,
know that term gets used so
sure.
much, but they're very, very clear about owning who they are.
Hmm.
They do not worry about appealing to everybody. One of the biggest things that I constantly tell clients that they have to get their heads around is listen, as a business owner, as a leader, you are not in the business of convincing, you are
Hmm.
in the business of converting. In
Mm,
other words, it's not your job or your brand's job to speak to everybody in the world, hoping that they're going to buy from you.
exactly.
It is your
Yes.
brand's job to speak to the few who have the highest probability of buying and will most deeply resonate with your message.
Hmm.
Period. Full stop.
Yeah.
So you've got to be willing to swallow that pill
Hmm.
in order to then do the work of saying, well, here's who I am and how I show up in the world. Now, who do I actually need to go after? That's the
Hmm.
second piece, because you're not going to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
And once you decide on the one or two or three audiences, maybe that you need to speak to, then you can write an authentic brand or effective message and
Right.
stay the course in delivering that. That's when all of a sudden this like attracts like thing happens.
Hmm.
You don't feel like you're losing your soul and your spirit trying to serve people because you start to get a different type of clientele coming in.
Hmm.
You get the right people in the room. You have a faster conversion to close ratio, meaning
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
sales cycle is better.
Hmm.
That's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I think long gone are the days of just trying to cast that massively wide net. In my mind, it's such a, I don't know, not to knock people, but a bit of an antiquated point of view with the amount of targeting that we have and the ability to kind of personalize things. There's no reason why you should try to be everything to everyone because, yeah, you're going to end up serving no one, especially not yourself. Now, say that you've worked with a client to kind of establish, create, and make this amazing brand trifecta, statement, pitch, and how do they start to get the message out from here? Could you elaborate on the practical steps businesses can take to deploy their
Yeah.
brand effectively and attract more
Mhm.
prospects to the table, as you say, users who click and customers who buy?
Absolutely. So you write the coolest brand in the world, but if you do not get it out into the world quickly,
Yeah.
it's really going to fall flat. So, a couple key principles. Number one, when you deploy your message, I really want to hold you to the fact that if you are a brand enthusiast and you love iterating and changing stuff all the time, stop it. You have to let it sit for 90
It's
days.
got to marinate.
Like give it a shot to work. Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes you've got to go have
Hmm.
40 or 50 conversations
Yeah.
to see if the right people out of the 40 or 50 are converting. Because
Hmm.
remember, this is a numbers game, right? So let's say you say, okay, out of 100 conversations, maybe only 30 people are viable prospects. And out of the 30 viable prospects, you know that only a percentage of them are actually going to turn into a proposal and close. So you cannot expect to put a brand into the world and have 100% of people, my friend, all of a sudden banging down your door to buy.
Yeah.
However, you will see impacts on sales cycle, revenue, sales, quality of prospect as you get this into the world. Probably the biggest thing that I tell my clients is, listen, this is not about having to re-architect your entire website, by the way.
Mm.
This is about a copy swap. So I want you to just like put some pressure off of you for a second, thinking
Yeah.
redesign a website, find all your collateral,
Yep. It's
hang
a very
on.
expensive endeavor. I love a good copy solve.
Yeah, just swap the copy. Okay, so your biggest things, if you're
Mhm,
like in serving businesses and you're B2B company, right? I always say the biggest ones that I want you to do in the first few weeks is update your copy on your homepage, your website, maybe
mhm,
your products and services page. Second, I would love for you to update that same copy, brand trifecta, in your proposals. You know how you typically have like about the firm section or about the company section? Ding, ding, ding. Goes
Yeah.
there. One pagers, sales sheets, your bios on social media,
Mhm,
and any slide decks maybe that you use for selling. Some people do use a deck. Okay. So I just
mhm,
want you to think about your pieces of collateral that you use in the sales process
mhm.
along with your website and your social bios. That's it. Start. After that, then you can start to really think about things like how can I start to speak to my brand trifecta in social posts? How could I
Mhm,
do this in email? How can I do this in my workshops that I teach? How
mhm.
can I speak to it in other ways? Even simple things like, oh, well, we have a physical shop, so maybe I want to put some decals on the wall with our new tagline. All of
Yeah.
that stuff can come a bit later, Amy, but
Mhm,
your first line of defense is website,
mhm,
collateral, social bios, the main things of what people are going to experience and
mhm.
use in the sales process to vet you.
Yes. I think that's a pitfall for some, right? Oftentimes you forget that all the way down to like the one-to-one customer conversation and experience, that that's an opportunity for the brand to be present. Again,
Yes,
not to say that all of your, help support people need to be like speaking the exact brand language, but they need to be giving that consistent brand experience that you expected on the front end as well
that's
as what you
right.
get on the back end. Great example. I'll give them a quick plug because they've been super amazing. I used Sticker Mule for some swag for an upcoming Together digital event. And as soon as the package was delivered, they asked for feedback. And I'd picked these like little hologrammatic stickers that are super cute, but kind of a bitch to design because like in the proof, you can't quite see the reflective qualities of the text. So I received the package, super excited, open up the stickers. They're practically illegible. I'm like, well, this was dumb. The proof looked pretty good to me. Like, I've got design experience. Like, I know a good proof when I see one. I think it's really more to do with the fact that you can't replicate that kind of sheen and reflectiveness on the sticker on digital. So I'm like giving some leeway, but they asked for feedback. So I was like, I would love it if you gave some specific parameters about what kinds of designs work well with these stickers, because this is the second time I've designed with this, and it's kind of both of them were disappointing. They responded within an hour saying, our designers are going to take a crack at updating your design so that we can make it look better for you. And then she's like, what are your CMS or CMYK colors?
Yeah.
We'll try to make sure it's on brand. Here's a two new proof options. I mean, she's been emailing me all morning long, and it's been such a wonderful experience that even
Yeah.
though I was disappointed and, again, having a design background, kind of understood the implications of the proof. So I wasn't trying to be a total jerk about my review. I was just very much like, this is the problem with these stickers. I just can't learn my lesson. And nonetheless, like the time, the consistency, and the quality of communication is kind of why I keep going back to them. And like they've got a solid user experience on their website, clean design. I'm just like, man, top to bottom, y'all just have this like brand experience down pat.
And that's one of the things that they can speak to in their brand trifecta as a core differentiator, right? Is
Hmm.
the client experience, the
Oh
efficiency,
gosh.
the speed to get things,
Hmm.
responsiveness, like so. And I think this is really interesting because it does speak to sometimes we struggle to figure out how are we different.
Hmm.
Now, I'll tell you, and this is interesting too, is one of the biggest pitfalls that I always see brands do is their number one thing that they name as a differentiator is their people.
Ah.
Okay, first of all, everybody says that.
Yep.
Like, I'm sure your people are fabulous, but
Sure.
unless you can tell me why your people are that much more extraordinary,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Bob is just as nice as Susan,
Yeah.
right? So, like, okay, so we have to kind of cut that out and actually get into differentiation points that speak to really what you were talking about. The most
Mm-hmm.
common ones, by the way, are things like you just mentioned. So that can be speed,
Mm-hmm.
efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
It can be customer service or responsiveness. Like we have a
Mm-hmm.
very like 24/7 we're available, or we'll get back to you within an hour. Very clear of what you mean by good customer service, right?
Yep.
You felt that. That was so timely.
Mm-hmm.
What about things like educational approach? Like, so one of mine is I deliver a brand playbook, or maybe
Oh,
it's a
I love that.
proprietary approach.
Yep.
Maybe you really teach people as a part of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, one of my differentiators is I only do branding.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that makes me different is I'm not a jack of all trades marketer. And I
Yep.
used to be, but I evolved and I realized people actually bought from me because I was an expert of my singular domain. And
Absolutely.
so that made me different. And so I
Mm-hmm.
leaned into that. For a lot of us, it's actually owning that point of differentiation with a sense of pride. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you, as individuals and as women, we struggle with that.
Yes.
One of
100%.
the hardest things for
Uh-huh.
us is to own how awesome we are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if we
Agree.
actually want to have a brand that is a path of least resistance to revenue,
Mm-hmm.
we have got to be willing to own how great we are and speak to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. I think self-promotion, it's just something that's been kind of sort of socially conditioned out of us in a lot of ways. And I also think the other part you said, I know we were going to have a lot of solopreneurs listening. We do support within the Together Digital community, a lot of women business owners. And it's so hard because they want to be all things to everyone and they don't understand why they can't land the clients that they want or that they wish for. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, they get a client that comes their way that says, Hey, like, for example, Kate, I know you do branding, but I really could use some social media content strategy. And your answer would probably be what?
Absolutely not. I have a great person I can refer you to, though.
Exactly. But so few women, especially when you're starting your own business, that's a scary thing to do. But to your point, the more you can niche down, the more you can specialize, the more you can show your, value, your benefit, your differentiation. Then all of a sudden you've got people coming to you because now it's like whenever somebody asks me something about branding, I'm like, I know who you should go talk to. You should go talk to Kate DeLeo.
Well, so yes, and you know what it is I learned a lesson a long time ago, which was that when I was trying to be everything for everybody, I was leading my business and my life from a place of desperation instead of
Mm,
invitation. I didn't
yes.
actually trust myself to be the expert. What was
Mm,
actually going on psychologically for me, like, let's just call this out. I was leading from desperation because
uh-huh.
I was deeply afraid that if I didn't say yes to everything, that I was
Uh-huh.
going to lose out on money.
Yep.
And I couldn't prove to myself that I could actually earn the right kind of money with the right people. I didn't actually believe I was great at what I was doing. I had a confidence issue. And, I'll tell you, we have got to be willing to say no to the good in order to say yes to the great.
Love it.
If
Yes.
we want a business and if we want a lifestyle that
Hmm.
allows us to operate in our expertise, that brings
Hmm.
joy and peace and this level of capability and living like we want, we cannot build companies and brands that make us consistently flounder out of our zone of
Yes.
expertise.
Yes.
Period.
I
Now,
agree.
what that means is you got to build your brand, you got to own it, and you got to stay with it.
Yeah. Like we said, you gotta let it marinate. And it's because I mean that's part of it, right? Is consistency. And if it's changing every 5 minutes, that doesn't breed trust, right? If I walked into your store, your cute little local shop, and every time I walked in, 1 minute it's a flower store, the next minute it's, I don't know, it's a stitching and sewing and craft store. I'm like, what's happening? Like every time I walk in here, something different. I don't know what to expect, and I don't trust it. So yeah, building and establishing that trust. And I love that advice you just gave, Kate. I think we need to pull that as some sound bites for sure. It's just like a good pep talk for our
So you know
female
what?
founders out there.
I'll tell you one other quick thing too that's really bode well for my business because I didn't know I could do this. By the way, I'll tell you for my journey. So when I took
Hmm.
this business full time, I was in the middle of a divorce.
Mm.
I left a high paying 6-figure corporate job that I was at the top of my game running 2 departments. Okay.
Hmm.
So I was crazy. Everyone's like, this is crazy. Why would you do this? And I went all in. And I'll tell you what, I quadrupled what I was making
Uh-huh.
in only 2.5 years.
That's amazing. I don't doubt it. It doesn't surprise me at all.
You
You're
absolutely can
awesome.
do this. But you know what? Do you know what I did that you were speaking to?
Hmm.
I stayed in my lane and I built a partner network.
Hmm.
Now, if you go to my website, you'll see a partners page.
Yeah.
All of these people are fantastic businesses and leaders that I know and I love and I trust. And I
Hmm.
always say I do life and business with them. And
Yep.
I don't take a penny from them if one of my clients or my friends finds them. They
Hmm.
can email them right from that page. I'm like, go on. If you want to get social media,
Love
call
it.
so and so, call Brooke. If you want design, call Natalie.
Hmm.
I actually have learned, interestingly enough, that by really creating a partner ecosystem, they're going to refer to me organically when the thing is
Yes.
right, and I'm going to
Uh-huh.
refer to them.
Yep.
But I actually have a practice in my business that I don't take referral fees.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what it did? Is I was finding that I didn't sit well with me because I would get on calls many years ago and it transactionalized the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I could see
I
that.
also felt deeply in my spirit that I wanted all the money coming into my bank account to be based off the work that I did and the
Right.
value that I delivered,
Hmm.
not because I was taking somebody else's hard earned money.
Yeah.
You know, Amy, if you go close $1,000 deal, is it really in your best interest that I'm taking 10%?
Right.
Is that what a friend does?
Hmm. No, no.
It was a hard pill to swallow because I'll tell you, for a lot of us, that's the nature of the game. And
Yeah,
some people have a great way that they do referral fees and they're able to do it in such a successful manner.
sure.
They're able to do it in a way that is true to their values. But
Hmm.
I just had to decide, as I build a partner network, how do I do this in a way that's authentic to who I am and
Yes.
protect the friendship,
Hmm.
protect the relationship, and is not slimy? And as long
Right.
as we can do that, I think that's what's going to help us grow.
I love it. I absolutely agree. And you do have a great network of partners. And I think again, it reciprocates, right? It comes back to you. So yeah, you don't need to take fees because you've established this authentic, true situation where you are from a genuine space, not for the sake of compensation, recommending these folks, which in turn, of course, they're going to recommend you. So I love it. You also might get a little bit of a soundbite now in my networking gap book because of that, because I think building that partnership aspect is such a great thing. I definitely talk about it on an individual level in the draft right now, but I haven't really branched into it from a business perspective yet. But from a business perspective, it makes so much sense. All right, let's get on to some more of these questions. Can you share some examples of brands that have successfully utilized conversations over stories to drive customer engagement and ultimately conversions? I want to hear some
Oh my
examples.
gosh. Well, first of all, how much time do we have? Do you know what? I'll give you a couple interesting brand examples that I think have done a really good job. First of all, one of the brands that I stumbled across that sells to consumers is Beard Club. They did a fantastic job when they really came onto the market of creating conversations, but not just with the men that needed the products, but with the wives or partners of the people with beards.
Yeah,
And I
so
was
smart.
blown away by this because I remember going and my husband was like, can you get me some beard stuff? I was like, I don't know the first thing about beard stuff. But of course, here I am in charge of going to get beard stuff because I'm the one that has to do all the shopping, right? I'm like,
Yep.
so I go onto this website and they immediately had like this clear crystal like tagline and value prop and a set of differentiators that were right there at the top of their website page. And I was like, yes. And I was in there and I was shopping so quickly. They knew how to get me as the partner to buy for the guy with the beard. They had
Hmm.
a chat bot. Not only that, but they said, do you want to talk to a real human? Click here. And I was immediately able to get
Yay.
into a conversation with somebody if I had a question about the different types of
Nice.
products. So that's one example. The other brand, believe it or not, that follows a lot of these principles, but in particular followed the principle of niching down. Let me give you a quick
Mhm.
example on that. Do you know who was brilliant at this? Facebook.
Oh, how so?
Do you remember in 2004 when Facebook hit the market?
I might.
Okay, so hi, my name's Kate, and I was a freshman in college. I'm dating myself now, right? So, okay, so freshman year of college, Amy, this is so funny. So, Facebook up until that point was beta tested with a number of, East and West Coast campuses.
Hmm.
Cool. In 2004, a number of us at universities got the email that you could join Facebook. But did you remember that Facebook used to be only for college students?
Yeah.
You had to have a .edu email.
Yep. To be able to get in. I do remember.
So, my friend, did they know that eventually they wanted to take over the world? Sure. But did they start there? No.
Oh, good
They
point.
knew that they had to do a really good job with one group and they niched in and then they waited for the demand to happen. So, this is our invitation again to decide to go after maybe one group. All
Hmm.
of a sudden, what starts to happen is other people want what you do.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, then you expand your marketing, your positioning, and your brand message to include some of those other groups. And that's like, on Facebook, then it was my dad joined Facebook 2 years later and my life was over.
Right? It's
Right?
done.
I was like, oh God. Yeah. Then they lowered the age range. So on and so forth. So that's a second brand. I could probably send you some additional examples, but those are two
Yeah.
of great companies that have followed these principles of creating brand conversation and
Hmm.
creating demand.
Yeah, I think would you include, I'm curious, experience as a part of a conversation?
Mhm.
Yeah, good. Because I'm thinking about that now as you were speaking about, at least the first example, and then I was sharing my sticker mule example is that when people advocate for a brand, what do they talk about? I
They
don't
talk
say,
about
ooh, my Nikes make me want to just get up and run every morning because they're Nike. No, I talk about the cushion. I talk about the quality. I talk about how they last long. It's the experience.
it is the experience. And even if we sell the businesses now, and this is interesting because consumer brands, by the way, what's so silly is consumer brands have it easy in the standpoint that they can have these nebulous taglines like just do it and some of these crazy taglines. But you know why that is versus sell B2B companies is because the number one question for businesses that they're going to ask you if you sell the business is what do you do? So your tagline needs to speak to what do you do for me? Whereas a consumer brand, a consumer does not ask, what do you do? A consumer subliminally is asking, who will I become and what experience can I expect when I have your product in my life?
Right.
So it's different now, but still experience holds true for businesses. Often what that looks like though as well is results.
Yeah.
What results can I expect? So does your brand effectively speak to outcomes?
Hmm.
Does it speak to results? Does it
Yeah.
speak to the experience in getting you to the outcome? If it's a
Hmm.
crappy experience, but you can grow revenue for me, I don't know if I want in with you.
Hmm. That's a good point. It's a good point. It kind of brings you back to I've done a lot of work on P&G in the past, and I mean, some of the most effective advertising out there was really about like the product experience and what you could expect and results focused. And I think, in the headiness that is being creative and even strategic at times and following trends, it's so hard. It's so easy to get away from sort of those core values, which are really the things that drive people to outside of emotions as we know from our friend Nancy Harhut, kind of
Yes.
cause people to consider and buy. I'm gonna pause for a moment because we've got just a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure we have time for questions from our audience. So, ladies who are listening with us live today, please be sure to drop them into the chat. Let us know if you've got a question. And then in the meantime, I'm going to ask you my last few just in case we don't
Yes.
get any questions. But Kate, this has already been such like a great informational and insightful packed conversation. I know we could go on for much longer, but could you share? I would love to hear another specific case study where the brand following your approach specifically increased its prospect engagement and conversions or conversations. I'm sorry.
Yes. Oh, this is a great one. So I had a SaaS company that was earlier stage, meaning smaller business, right? Team of like
Hmm.
5 people. And they sold this online SaaS program that was geared towards CEOs and sales leaders who were their primary target audiences. And so we built the brand trifecta message and we did a few layers of messaging. We did not only the homepage, but then we also did more role specific brand trifectas. So, what was in it for the CMO who might be
Mm.
needing to know? What was in it for the CFO? What was in it for the sales leader? So on and so forth. Okay. So, we built all that. And the result of building that messaging is that we started to see a decrease in sales cycle. Because what was happening is by the time somebody got on a discovery call, that person was no longer asking, what do you do? They already knew all of that. And yes, they had feature in benefit charts. And yes, they had a couple explainer videos, right? But by the time somebody got on that call, the brand trifecta solved a lot of those questions in their
Mm,
mind. And so
hmm.
what was happening is that person, if they held that call, was coming in already opting in, saying,
Yeah.
that's great. I saw all this. So I have this problem. Can you solve that? And how much would it cost?
Hmm.
Meaning the brand trifecta got that person to an opt-in. So what we're seeing is that instead of you having to have that particular company, they were doing like 2 to 3 calls just to get to a proposal.
Hmm.
They actually shrank that
Ugh,
and they went down to one 45-minute call to get a
awesome.
ballpark price and proposal out to then a close.
That's
Now that's
fantastic.
that's the kind of stuff that this can do
Hmm.
for you. For me, for my business, one call, proposal out same day, close. I should not have to do more than one call. If I have to
I
do more
love
than
it.
one call, that signals to me that I either missed the memo or they're not right for me.
Mm, yeah,
So
that's
that's
fantastic.
really common as sales cycle. Watch your sales cycle.
Hmm.
If you sell a product, last piece, I have a client that saw a very interesting trend, and actually I see this in a number of consumer brands that sell through e-commerce.
Hmm.
We see a decrease in time on site, but an increase in sales.
Hmm.
Why? Because, okay, my turn to
I
cough.
know it's all good. We got editing. We got our lovely SEO for that. I'll give
Because
her
what's
the heads
happening
up.
is somebody's immediately understanding what you're selling and going to shop and buy faster versus having to search through content and search for answers before they purchase.
Hmm.
So sometimes what this signals is that the metrics we once thought were important are no longer important. Time
Yeah.
on site 5, 10 years ago was really important. And now what we're
Hmm.
realizing is that time on site actually may not be as
Right.
critical. Shopping
Hmm.
cart abandonment rate is interesting.
Sure.
Purchases is interesting,
Hmm.
but it's really allowing us to take a different analytical approach to go, listen, I don't care how long somebody's on the site. If they're going to a
Yeah.
purchase faster, hallelujah.
Right. I make more money with people clicking through versus just perusing my website, my beautifully designed and so intriguing website. No, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that's so amazing. It's such a great example.
Good. So those are the biggest ones that I see for different, and that I had a flower company, by the way.
Hmm.
They sell wedding flowers online,
Hmm.
$10 million company.
Ooh,
But that's a lot of flowers you sell
a
every
lot of
year.
flowers. Hmm.
So within 1 week of implementing their brand trifecta on their site, they saw a 50% increase in conversions.
Wow.
This works.
Yeah, it's working. That's amazing. That's awesome. And what a boost. So you all, just to get a little bit more into the weeds on brand trifecta, you all work with businesses of all sizes?
I do. Yep.
Okay.
And my book, by the way, for those that are listening who are kind of going, I want to explore the method a little bit more. I'm
Yeah.
curious about what this looks like. I actually would recommend that you consider taking a look at the book that I wrote called Muting the Megaphone. And you can find that on my website, which
Hmm.
is going to be in the show notes. But it really dives into how do you can write this on your own. Maybe you're somebody that wants to take a first stab at looking at how do I build this? How do I write this? That's a great resource. It's like 120 pages. So it's really just like it's
Love
very
it.
practical, very
Yeah.
like step by step.
Uh-huh.
But that digs into that process. And then the other thing is brandtrifecta.com, which is really the whole methodology in action in an online platform. Walks you through what does that look like to be able to build this for your own organization.
So fantastic. Again, Kate, I'm such a fan of you, your passion, your methodologies, the way that you bring clarity to something that can feel very big, daunting, and made easily complex, such as branding and communications. I think you are truly working within your zone of genius. Like I said, I ran up to Kate's booth right after her talk at Content Marketing Round. I'm like, let's be friends. Here's my
You have your
card. Let's
suitcases, you're
talk.
like, listen, I'm running out the door, but I just want to talk to you. I was like, okay, it's so
Well,
great.
because it's just such a rare thing to find, I think. One, getting more women up on stage and doing more speaking, packing rooms in the way that you packed them in. But then again, like just again, having such a clear, distinct, differentiated point of view and value and the way in which you promote yourself and speak to your business and your practices it's just very inspirational. And like I said, I just knew that our members and our listeners would take a lot away from this conversation. So hopefully for those of you who
Thank
listening
you.
felt that way. We had a lot of happy, agreeable chatter, but no additional questions. So we will wrap this up for the day and let everyone get back to your Friday. But Kate, so glad you got to come in and join us
Thank
for this
you.
discussion. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, this was awesome. Thank you so much, Amy, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Awesome. All right. My pleasure. Everyone, have a fantastic Friday. Until then, keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing. We'll see you next week. Bye.